Welcome to another in the series of DTUC Visits the Artist. I'm Ernie Underhill, the curator-director of the MacGregor Gallery, and the artist we're going to look at today and talk with is Les Weisbrich. Les is from South Slocan. His studio is there, but quite fortunately he's in downtown Nelson today in a well-known gallery here where he's presently got a one-person show in progress. Les, I want to look at your work, and I want to talk a little bit with you about what you've done, but I've known you for quite a while as an artist and as an associate teacher, but I don't know an awful lot about your history. I'd like to know where you're coming from. Where were you born, for example?
Well, I was born in New Jersey, and that has to be something that you want to forget about, particularly where I was born. But we moved at a young age to the coast with my family and settled in the Los Angeles area. And I basically studied there. And then we went back to New York a couple of times and did a little bit of studying back in New York at Pratt for a very short time.
That's the art school?
Yeah, the art school at Pratt. And then came back out to the coast and went to the Art Center in Los Angeles for about a year and a half. And that seemed to be... not to knock them folks, they turn out some awfully good students there, but it wasn't quite what I wanted, and there was a grand old gentleman of the old Bauhaus named Fred Kahn, for those art historians that remember the Chicago Art Institute.
Oh, that's where the Bauhaus began in America,
pretty much began in America, and Fred was very much a part of that, along with Moholy Nagy and Gregory Kefish and the rest of them. Anyway, he started a school in a very altruistic endeavor to a point where it lasted 4 years. But while we had the who's who of all the disciplines in Los Angeles, Saul Bass taught advertising graphics, Mentner Hubner, illustrator, painter, Swale Sarasog, Don Kingman, all those folks were there.
So you were caught up in this Bauhaus movement?
Yeah, it was that kind of a movement. And looking at my paintings, at this day and age, I don't think any of us would ever think of me as painting Cubist things and being a great fan of George Braque and the rest of them. But,
I wonder if there aren't some underlying concepts involved.
Oh, I think there is.
Even though you are dealing with realism.
Oh, yes, I think there is.
Your viewpoint, certainly color. I know you're a great colorist, and you're a great one that thinks a lot about color theory and its application. And that certainly was
yeah, that's the disciplines that came from the Bauhaus. I think that interdisciplinary background is probably one of the keys that I find in my 50s now. I don't have to think too much about painting. I can kind of reach back intuitively and paint. And that almost subjective background supplies me with just an unlimited kind of approach to the paintings now without having to think about them consciously. The paintings do flow very easily, and they're very personal, so it becomes a very, very comfortable thing now, where opposed to having to develop it. I think a fine artist, and if I'm going too fast, I get a little bit speedy here, but if an artist has to think too much about his painting, he may well take another look at what he's doing and maybe go another way, because it ought to flow from you somewhere. It ought to come from your heart, your stomach, somewhere. It ought to feel good.
That was the underlying principle, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
All these meticulous planning ideas were to become automatic.
They were to become automatic, but to hone that skill of seeing them, that seems to be when I stress it when I teach a little. The process of actually seeing opposed to looking all the time. We're great lookers, we're not great seers, and the expressions that present themselves constantly in nature are a seeing kind of process.
Yeah, that's probably a good example.
Yeah, that's a good example. You get into the more the microcosm, and I hate that word, but I don't know what else to call it. It's square foot landscapes maybe or something. Yeah. And it's not a conscious thing at all, Ernie. I don't sit down with a predetermined. I'm not looking for something when I go on a creek or stand out in the field or walk along the beach or something. I just usually go, get my stuff out, sit down, and just relax for a moment. Usually there's 4 or 5 paintings there without looking at all. You start to see the paintings, and I think that's a key to any artist. It's a helpful tool.
When you went out to the West Coast, when you finally went out, where were you at? Were you still studying as a student?
Oh, I was studying as a student when we first arrived. I was young, and that whole background, I guess I was like a child protege. I was just very fortunate. Every teacher I ever had, fondest recollections of all those things. I don't remember studying anything in the 6th grade. I painted a mural. And it's evidence in my speech at times. I'm sure I missed some
So you started pretty early with this idea of
Yes.
the artist.
Always was going to be an artist. Never any question about that. Did a lot of other things, but always was going to be a painter. And I started out as a painter. Started out very traditionally, and then was influenced when I was about 15, 16 years old with the Kahn Institute. And then the war came along, that big one they had down there. One more of their wars, and it was pretty obvious that you weren't going to do much as a civilian. You were going to play sailor.
We're talking about 1941.
Yeah, this was 1940 when I went in, and I spent a very short time in the Navy.
Not a war artist, were you?
No, I was too young for that. I had a visual aids appointment, but the war terminated, fortunately, in '45, and I was out then. And I was kind of sick. I got sick in the Navy, sick of the Navy and sick in the Navy. So, and I got out, and then I went back to art school, and that's where I went to Kahn. And that was very fruitful, I think, because it prepared me to get into the commercial field, which you ultimately would come into. My family was starting to grow. I have 6 sons and a daughter.
Any artists in the family?
A couple of them, but I think they're latent. They're not gonna. They're scared. I'm intimidating or something. I don't know what that's about. But I provided them a way to go in the studio. They chose to direct traffic for street shots that we would do in Hollywood and things like that, opposed to learning the graphics. So we'll see what they do as they mature more. So.
How about yourself? Did you come from an artistic family?
Not directly. Indirectly, yes. My great-grandfather was in Germany. Was quite a painter. Have a few of his old etchings that are just lovely, almost Stuart-like things. The big embellishing oak tree, every leaf painted and what have you. And I don't think of myself, understand, Ernie, as a realist. That totally, I'm not a super realist by any means. But the disciplines of commercial art have really applied here. I can look at the texture of a leaf or a rock or moss, and it doesn't overwhelm me, but I think it does maybe other artists developing. They become trapped with the detail opposed to why the detail's there. There's something very intriguing about detail, but it's not a painting. It has nothing to do with the total statement.
Well, you would have gone to art school in those years when the teachers and certainly students were conscious of all the different isms and schools that came into being, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Cubism, and the effect that these had. How did they affect you, if at all?
Well, I think they affected me directly. As any young developing artist, I think you have to some degree, lean on the past masters, no matter what the discipline. And I did. I just thought Braque and Picasso and Duchamp's things were just the most exciting things I ever saw. To take static elements and break them into planes and cubes and get them moving and get that kind of motion into a still life was very exciting. And I painted that way for quite a while, realizing somewhere along the way that I'm never going to be a Braque.
Right.
And I don't think I wanted to be. But I think the discipline of seeing things in those sort of relationships of planes and values and textures just sort of lent itself. And then by that time, I was starting to sell an awful lot of commercial art. And it's hard to be a fine arts painter and want to sell a painting at that time maybe for $500, and when you could do an illustration for $1,000. And it was half the work, and you're raising your family and all those things. You got to buy bread like everybody else. So pretty soon you're doing commercial art. I enjoyed it for about 15 years. I really did. But then pretty soon the studio got so big I was basically administrating it. The rat race of Hollywood was, we were doing a lot of entertainment by that time, and a lot of shows on CBS rather, NBC and ABC. And a lot of documentary films and titles and so forth. So
at that time, illustration tended to be pretty naturalistic or realistic.
Oh, it
if you
was,
want.
yes, yeah.
How was this affected by the development of photography, color photography?
I think the one classic one, and this is interesting that you mentioned this because we did the first sun-kissed orange illustrations before Carbro separations were come into being in photography. And when we painted an orange, we painted every dimple of the orange with 3 values. And the restrictions of that kind of illustration was so demanding. Renwick's, Al Parker, all those folks we were painting with. And by that time, the advent of good color photography was just like a great release to us. The dam opened up. We could now go, we could be more flamboyant in our illustration. Our illustration had to be photographically accurate to the nth degree. It was super realistic stuff. And that's where I come from. God knows where some of those paintings are.
Right behind you. Look at that, Les. Look at
Well,
if we can get a zoom in on the moss there.
I just enjoyed that painting, and not to get into going through the show and explaining all the paintings, but every once in a while, again, that nature presents something. Here's this. These are almost like bristlecone pines. They're actually juniper trees down in Oregon, and my God, they're so tortured. They start out with about a 4-foot diameter base, and as most of the logging industry knows around here, if you got a 4-foot diameter base, you got a 100 and some foot tree. Those trees are about 30 feet high. They start out great, and then the weather is so severe and so windy and dry and arid, what have you, that this poor tortured thing manages to grow up to about 30 feet and become called a tree. But the texture and the weathering that exists on it, the mosses that do exist on it, are just overwhelming. And that sort of thing is, again, what presents itself to me. You can't go by them and not be awed that they're still alive and they're growing. And
yeah. I wonder, Les, what the difference is. You're in the graphic field, and it was pretty demanding.
Right.
Every hour was accounted for. Yet you're still doing things that are quite exacting, yet they're comfortable. It feels like you're not concerned with time.
I think if I were to analyze a painting now, opposed to the paintings I did illustratively, I'd have to say that I don't spend near the amount of time that the painting infers that I spend. There's a lot of detail in juniper tree here, but there's a lot of very loose, wet stuff going on. And I've learned to use the techniques of watercolor to quickly get to the area that I want to talk about. And that's the detail area generally. And then I could spend a few days noodling and playing with those particular things, and I'm not overworked. Whereas maybe seeing that kind of detail, you might reflect back into the background. But most of my backgrounds are put in a matter of minutes. They're an impression. My mentor of who I really respect are the Impressionists. I mean, I would, if I could paint like them, I'd love it.
Yeah, that was next question.
Pizarro, Monet, all those. I just love their work, and that would be the art that I would. That's the art I buy if I can afford it. That's the kind of art that I'd have around me, opposed to the kind of artwork I do. But I can't be that satisfied with the Impressionist statement. I can make an Impressionist statement about the background to set the scene, to set the mood, the time of year, the day, whatever. But I need the energy and the disciplines then to get into the detail.
Yeah, that's an interesting contrast, because and we look at your folder as we get by. I was going to ask you about that. Both the Impressionists and yourself, very concerned with nature.
Right.
The Impressionists seem to have been concerned with a specific moment.
Oh, right, yes. Light,
whereas you're dealing with nature over a longer period of time. They were trying to catch a moment of light conditions.
Yes.
How do you rationalize a long process with nature where from morning till evening, the sun's changed?
Well, I think that generally presents itself in a way that I really enjoy, because it's maybe 3 or 4 paintings. If you look at my work, my wife will say this to me, didn't you do that birch grove? And I'm saying, how could I have done that birch grove? I'm not even there. That birch grove was 10 miles from here. And she says, yeah, but it's a birch grove. And all I can say is it's a group of people. You know, you meet a group of people on the street in Nelson, and you meet a group of people in Castlegar or Trail or Vancouver. They're different people.
Right.
The birches have the same quality. The rock, that particular rock on the beach that says, "Hey, here I am, paint me," along with the other 1,000 that are sitting there, but just me, just talk about me. That's important to me. That's very important to give the dignity to that particular subject that presents itself to me. And I keep using that word, presenting, but with students I find that they sit down and they want an explosion to happen for them, some great inspiration to say, "Here I am," and all you have to do is just sit there for a moment, and there's probably not a place in British Columbia that you can't make 20 paintings of if you don't move your chair from other than 360 degrees. So I think that's pretty much what I have here.
Are you a student of Zen Buddhism by any chance?
No, not at all. I just, is that a reflection in my hair?
No. In your thoughts on 20 paintings from one moment.
I think I'm, in one respect, rather Eastern in that I think the discipline of strokes in that are very necessary. But then again, I don't know, was Van Gogh, he wasn't a disciplinarian of that either, but he did count strokes. It's important not to overwork a painting, and it's awfully easy to overwork a painting that you talk about this much detail with. And the key seems to be is know your color, know your subject, and really know your subject. I don't think we'd ask anybody in any profession to undertake the things that an artist undertakes without knowing his subject as well as he should. And an awful lot of artists, unfortunately, don't know their subject. They paint a window and they don't know how a window works. So as a consequence, the mullions don't fit right, the mutton doesn't fit right, the sash is in the wrong place. I know how a barn's built. I don't know where that comes from, another life maybe.
Right.
Or
Speaking of
barns,
let's focus on the one above your head.
Yes.
Okay, this makes an interesting transition from the last one we saw to one we're going to see, because it incorporates a little more, I think, consciousness of the media taking over or wanting to do a few things on its own. Mostly the sky, I guess I'm talking about.
Right. Might be a reason to go out to the prairies or something.
Right.
We'll get out to the big sky country. I don't know. I don't think in terms of why I paint a particular subject. I was almost known there for a while as somebody that just painted rocks, and it seems to me I paint everything. But you get out in Richmond on the coast, anybody that's from there, you know what it is. It's layering of clouds, and it was there. I'm not sure about paintings like this. I don't think about why I paint them. I just paint them, and God love the people that purchase them. You know, I don't have to think about, do I paint something that is an atmosphere, and that will be the kind of thing somebody would maybe like because it reflects on the area they're from or something. I don't really have to think about that. Every once in a while, almost that impressionist kind of thing happens to me. It's an absolute moment. It lasts milliseconds. You canoe across the lake, and the color of the water is one color, and you sit down, you don't even look back at it, you set your palette, look back at it, and it's a whole other palette. I've learned to look at those things and record that kind of a memory of that. I use other methods to record it. I'll use anything I can, cameras, sketches, shorthand, whatever I got at hand to get it down, and especially if it is one of those quick moments. This one here.
And the next one. Yeah, the other thing I was going to ask you, how much difference do you pay to nature in terms of working directly from or going back with things remembered and working in your studio?
Well, obviously, up here, you do an awful lot of studio work. The weather is not conducive to doing watercolors outside. I love to paint outside. Not to jump ahead of this one, Ernie, but this Elbow River, we just got back from Alberta. I did this on the spot, the whole thing. It was no other means available to me. I didn't even have a pencil with me. I had my paints, so I painted it there. Generally, I'd bring this one back. It's difficult to balance on your knee on a little folding chair and all those things. But to answer that question, yes, sometimes, as many times as I can, I paint outside. Love it. It's
okay, the other question then is, did you actually see that, or is this Les Weisbrich's imagination?
No fantasies at all in my in my paintings anymore. I don't. There were times when there was, but now we were coming up through Colville, and it was doing everything. The sun was shining, the rain was raining, and it was. We stopped. We were had a cup of coffee in the car, and all at once it was pouring on us. The sun was blaring down in another place, and all at once the whole thing was a little wild, turbulent storms just squalling all over the place. Had no paints with me. This was all painted basically from the memory of it and some notes I made to myself. I didn't even have paints with me. So I just made some mental and written notes that depicted what was there and actually sort of sketched it out. But came back, and I didn't do it justice. I mean, I missed. But it was incredible what was happening. You never do a great painting. That's the problem. They all fall short.
Obviously, the discipline has worked well in training you to be able to retain in your mind's eye, situations like that.
You have to, I think. I can be a very, very overbearing, pedantic person to be in a car with. You just don't get to drive anywhere with me. You get to see all the colors and textures and everything that's happening along the way. So.
Well, if I can gently force you back, we'll see some more of your work. I noticed in a number of these, you're beginning to close in on you're digesting smaller viewpoints.
Yeah. There are times when the trees are, like this was out in the rainforest and on the island, and we did a series of paintings out there. I say we because my wife is always with me on these things. And you look at a rainforest, and there is so much vegetation. It's so plush. It's like going to Bouchard Gardens. It's almost obscene. There's so many flowers there. The rainforest presents that same thing to me. There's so much vegetation. It's so plush and lush that how do you talk about it? And all at once, there it is. It's just one crotch of a tree. It's just a cloak of moss. There's just one enveloped tree that is just so thick and juicy with moss that you paint it. And it's the same thing with a rock. You find these incredible colors, cobalt sitting alongside of these beautiful apple greens, which just they're not combinations in color theory I put together, but in nature they happen all the time. So I'm looking for those sort of things as well. I'm looking for light on the lake like this, late January, those kind of moments that our sun is up for 4 hours in British Columbia. So you get a quick look at it down the lake. You surely can't sit out there. I think it was about minus 28 that day or something. So you make as many mental notes and as much shorthand to yourself as you can. I do use photography, but I don't paint from the photographs. I use the photography to record color, times of day, textures, and things like that. But if I'm sitting at this spot and I've composed this, and I usually do that on the spot, then I'll go down the beach and shoot back and shoot different places. And I'd be less than truthful if I didn't say I used some of those photographs somewhere in the end of February to maybe build another painting that I've got sketched. I'll use some of the elements from it, but I don't. There's certainly no reason to paint a photograph. My goodness, that's another art form. So,
in reviewing the bibliography, we started with. I left you on the West Coast.
All right.
In graphics. You're caught up under the pressure of deadlines and all that. What happened? What are you doing here in the Kootenays?
Well, let's see. We'll try to make it a shorter story than what it is. The Kootenays I didn't know about the Kootenays. As most Americans, unfortunately, when you are educated, you know that there's a place called Canada. And we came up to visit the Eskimos in the igloos. We really did. The last 8 years of my studio life down there, I think I had 3 days off in a row one time. And we had the success, in quotes, that you might obtain in a very urban, fast-living society. We were free to travel anywhere in the world that we wanted to, but we never had time to. We had our Porsche, and we had our swimming pool, and the big house, and blah, blah, and the electric fence, and all those things. But no time to enjoy those sort of things. The responsibility of commercial art in Los Angeles, particularly Beverly Hills, was the responsibility of putting out an ad campaign maybe for Max Factor or something that represented maybe $3-4 million in just space purchase. That responsibility was just totally abstract to what I felt was real problems. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think, my God, did one of my people make that correction in that corporate line on the bottom of the ad and call in the correction? If he didn't, we just bought an $80,000 ad. And I don't care about an $80,000 ad for Catalina or Sony or something like that. We never had to eat one of those jobs, but the pressure of that is just a little bit unreal. And it was on me. There was no question about it if it went wrong. So we looked at one another and said, why don't we go to Switzerland or something? A lot of other reasons to get out of Los Angeles, get out of the United States, because I don't, politically, I'm a fairly political person, and I don't believe in what they do down there in a lot of areas. So I was not held to any great loyalties to stay a United States citizen. That didn't. In fact, I was a little embarrassed about it. So to say the least. And in the Vietnam War was on. I had 3 sons that were ready to go in that thing, and they all came up here to Canada with us. They're all here in the Kootenays. I didn't say they had to come up. They were all of age. They could have done what they wanted to do. I provided a way that they could come up, and if they wanted to, they could, and they did. And I don't know. I think we as Canadians now are better off as a result of it. I think Canada got the better end of the Vietnam thing. I really do. The people I know that have come up here are some of the keener, brighter people that were down there. They didn't fall into the trap of being part of that mess that continually goes on.
Well, I know the Kootenays is much the richer for that. We've got a wealth of creative people in the area now.
Really, incredibly creative people in this area. And maybe to further answer your question, when we came up, we just drove up into the valley. We went through the Slocan Valley, and we thought, my God, this is Canada? There's no icebergs and things, and we haven't seen an Eskimo yet. And went up onto the lake, Slocan Lake, and met a young man that had come up there about 3 or 4 years before that we knew in CBS, and said, my God, Peter, how do you live here? And he says, what do you mean? How do you live down there? And we said, right, where do we buy property at? So we did. We bought 50 acres on the lake, or just up above the lake, and figured I would take about 3 years to get up here. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had enough money, all those things. And so I said, well, we'll go back and I'll finish out my contracts and we'll come up. This was going to be a short story. Anyway, we went down. I lasted about 9 months, and we said, that's it. My wife was still there, and with the smaller kids, and smaller, they were still in their young teens. We had 6 teenagers in Los Angeles, so that's why I'm really a young man, and I look old. And it's terrible to be that way. But anyway, that was part of our problem, was to get ourselves out of there as quickly as possible while the energy was still exciting for us to do something entirely different. So I've got a new career up here, a career that's kind of gone a whole circle. I started out, I had one-man shows when I was 13 years old in Los Angeles.
So
and now I've kind of come around. I'm back to my one-man show. But we've had many one-man shows up here, and I continue to, and obviously we'll have many more.
Well, this one is quite successful, and yeah, let's take a look at some others in the show. I don't think we're going to have time to see all your work. So the best I can say is for the viewers to come down here and have a look and try and catch the rest of your work.
Well, fine.
I'd like to introduce my associate curator and director of the gallery here, Bev Mills, who helped put the show together for us. Bev?
Hi.
What else have you got coming in, Bev?
Well, we have quite a lineup of shows. There's a mixed media show starting on the 15th by Dana Wardrop, drawings and paintings. Watercolors by Phyllis Margolin. We have a ceramic clay show and photography combined show coming up, and then we have a mixed show for Christmas for 6
great.
weeks.
How do you feel about Les's show? How's the response been to that?
Oh, this has been the most exciting 2 weeks since we opened business.
Really?
Yeah, it's
He's well known in the area, certainly.
yes. We've had more people in for this show than any other show that we've had, and more excitement, and so that we who have had the pleasure of being indoors with this for the last 2 weeks have picked up on the excitement. It's been good.
I guess what Bev and I are interested in, Les, is where are you going from here? I mean, where is this kind of work taking you? What do you see?
I see kind of the expression of like water right now. Now, water has been, there's quite a few paintings in here that are water, and I've really been enjoying making water move. And maybe to get into a little of the technical aspect of it, Ernie, I don't use white, so I have to mask. That's how I can hold the detail. And like in Bracken here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's all the subject area has to be masked out, and then I paint the background. That means, you know, not to get into all the technical qualifications of it, but I have to control even the loose areas very, very, very strongly, so that by the time I do get to the foreground and the subject area, I can deal with it and deal with the intensity and so forth. So I see the paintings kind of going in that direction. This is an older painting, and those things kind of come and go in my painting. I don't know. It's hard to analyze your own work, to say where is it going. It's just going because I'm enjoying painting it. There's a million paintings to paint. I hope I can live to be an old centenarian like a few people I know. That would really be lovely.
Well, you certainly live in an area where you can be as influenced by water as you want to.
Yes. Isn't that
How
the
did
truth?
the public respond in, what was their preference here in what Les?
I think the water and rocks, you know, a lot of people just kind of zero in on that, and certainly the bracken, but, you know, not so much the buildings, but the water and the rocks. I think that's what takes people in immediately.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about the kind of time that seemed evident in the work here and how people responded to that. The idea that there's a lot of work has happened here, a lot of man hours have occurred. Or if you'd been a woman, of course it would be woman hours.
Right.
What about that?
Well, yes, I know what you mean. And people feel like they're really getting something for their money because it looks like there's a heck of a lot of work in it. And it has value to them because they say, wow, look at that. That must have taken just forever to paint. Look at the detail, you know.
And yet Les gave it away. He said that, you know, he's developed through the years and he doesn't really put that much time in it.
No, not really.
Yeah.
A few paintings seem to come hard, or they come hard in the sense that you become very cautious. Ta-ta.
Oh, that's a good one to talk about.
Okay, this is
Right,
an excellent one to talk about, whitewater. You can lose that painting so quickly by getting too dark. So as a consequence, you go very slow. So the painting took maybe quite a long time by comparison to the actual painting time. Mainly because I was a little nervous. The closer I got to a reasonably good painting, I slowed down even more. I tested a lot more on the sides. I paint. If the mats were off, you'd notice all around the edges here, there's all the test areas of all my painting, because this is actually on one solid piece of watercolor board. I don't paint on watercolor paper. I paint on a watercolor paper that's mounted on a board. And it gives me the rigidity. I don't have to deal with that warping and all that thing that happens
So you have
with
more
it.
control?
A lot more control. It's a lot more portable for me. I can take these out and sit down on a creek bed or something and not feel like I've got to, you know, I've hauled 30 pounds of material with me. Watercolor is supposed to be a portable medium. I got more stuff than when I painted oils and wash and things.
You're pretty well settled in this area.
Oh,
Although
yes.
you were saying you have plans for a large studio.
Oh yes, yeah.
This
yes.
is going to be your home.
You bet. Oh yeah, we became citizens, and we unfortunately built a hobbit house, which was never supposed to be a house. That's why we're down here to some degree, Ernie. I know you would like to have come up and seen my my place of work, but at this moment it's the upstairs of a 45 12 by or 14 by 16 area that's on a 45. There's not much walking space, not much painting space, to be perfectly honest. But then it's a big improvement where I painted the years before that, which was at the end of the bed in our bedroom. So I'm used to a big studio. I had one in Beverly Hills, and I have always had a studio. Here I don't. So I don't think my work will improve, but my mental attitude probably will. So.
How about your size? Is that much to do with your studio
It's pretty
space?
much, no, it has pretty much to do with the way I see the subjects. I've been painting a lot of small things, and they don't, unless you were to sort of fantasize them. I noticed there was an artist out on the coast recently I saw, a very exciting thing she had done with little wildflowers. She had blown them up to like 6 feet. And that would probably be the next transition from, not from me, but to paint a wildflower, you can't paint it much larger than about twice size. You know, you paint a little sticky aster that big, and it looks like a chrysanthemum. So even though it's accurately painted. So it has to be almost painted that size or else some fantasy size. And I think the subjects have a tendency to be that sort of thing. I want the people to have a trip in my paintings, not deliberately, but I want them to sort of discover the things that I discovered. That there is a subject, but there's so much more going on, and yet the panorama is not necessarily what I don't have to go to the Canadian Rockies to paint. I can walk down on the beach and get a rock. I can get a little eddy in the water or something. So.
Well, thanks very much, Les, for showing us your work. And,
my pleasure.
My
pleasure, Ernie.
On behalf of Bev and myself, we're really glad to have you here.
Beverly, thank you.
It's a pleasure having your work, too.
Thank you.
I might add that the show is on till when, Bev?
This is on until the middle of next week.
And there's an interesting brochure that Les has put out that can be picked up here, if he has enough.
Oh, yes, we have
They're in
plenty.
full
They
color.
are free. And
Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah, can you open that?
I'll open it up and we can see a little clearer.
Great.
And so with that, we thank you for your attendance.